Hi, my name is David Margolin, and I'm going to take you through my forecast process. This is the forecast I submitted for the subseasonal forecast. Um, Today is September 24th, and the forecast, this is the 16 to 20-day forecast for October 9th through the 13th, and we're forecasting in national CDDs. As always, I want to thank Maxar here too for all the support and weather data to make this possible. All right, so I'm not going to go into as much detail as last time, so I hopefully don't bore folks too much. I'm going to start by just talking about my forecast, my formula, talk about some of the other factors I considered, and maybe also just take a little bit of a look at some of the other forecasts here and formulas. All right, so my forecast is input number one here near the bottom. So today I went with a forecast mean of 14.4, a spread of 4.4, and my forecast formula is here. You'll note, I'm going to click on read more. I did not make any changes in my formula from last week. So I've got 50% of my weighting on the 10-year normal, 25% on trend. It's a trend input that we've added to the forecast contest. You can actually see it up here. 10% on the EC, and again, the EC we include for users of the forecast contest. You can find it up here. And 15% on the top 10 hottest. That's a metric I came up with. I haven't actually back tested it to see how effective it is, but it's my sort of hackish way to account for climate change and the fact that uh, you know things are likely to continue to get warmer. If you'd like to see a little bit more details into my formula and how I kind of came about this, you can find this in our spreadsheets. Anyone who has access to the forecast contest can have access to the spreadsheet, and I have my analysis each week, including this week, and so you can kind of see how the sausage is made, so to speak. All right. In terms of other factors that I kind of considered today, I went through my normal process, and that includes kind of looking at the EC and CFS maps. And I usually start in the 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15. I go into the 16 to 20. And that gives me a sense as to the evolution of the forecast, which I think at times can be important. Is the pattern consistent? Is it transitioning? I think some of those things can at least give you subjectively some view as to the confidence in the forecast. One of the things you clearly see today is that this is we are in from a national CDD standpoint, we are in a very warm regime. We have been. And September, I think, for example, is projected to come in as the highest month since 1950. So highest on record in terms of national CDD. So this is a very warm month. Um, and the 1 to 15-day forecast is also, I think, one of the highest, if not the highest on record. So it's been warm. It's very warm. It's projected to be very warm, near at record levels. And so, there's certainly a temptation when I see that to think, okay, should I go with persistence? Should I just ride that out and go with something that's really, really warm, a lot warmer than maybe my formula would suggest? The bottom line was, at the end of the day, I couldn't justify it. Now I've looked at, excuse me, battling a little cold here. I've looked at some of the other inputs, and I know some folks, um, rely on angular momentum and things like that. But one of the things I always struggle um, with things like fading the forecast, warmer or colder based on atmospheric angular momentum or MJO, is how do you know that that's not already baked into the ECM or CFS forecast, right? And so that's, to me, that's an important research project. And without knowing that information conclusively, I find it difficult to fade the forecast one way or the other. Um, I want to make a couple comments about the EC and CFS. I won't elaborate too much because we talked about this last week, but the bottom line is performance continues to be pretty poor with these models. Um, you can see if we go to the cooling season 2019 and sort this, we can see the performance by the EC is still below the 30-year climatology, and the CFS is even worse. Um, I also want to point out we've got a great graphic here by Luke LaBelle. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I think it's this one. So Luke is working on improving our uh, performance metrics and ways that folks can test new formulas and things like that. We'll have more of that later. But this is a graph it's still in research mode, but I think there's some interesting things here, and I wanted to share it. So you can see the legend here. So this blue dash line is the 10-year normal. You can see starting in June, going all the way out to near September 1st. The dotted line is the 30-year normal, so it's cooler, right, than the 10-year. And then overlaid on top of this, you also have the CFS in red, the ECMWF is blue, and the observations in black. And the dates are based on initialization. So, for example, the 6-1, this is when the forecast was initialized. Um, and so the verification would be 16 to 20 days later. So this would show you the verification 16 to basically like June 16th to June 20th. Just a couple quick things. I just think this is a really nice way to look at things. I think a couple like things come out pretty clearly. The CFS model. I mean, just way too cold, consistently, persistently for much of the summer. You can see that here. Uh, I think one thing that comes out with the ECMWF here, which is again in blue, is obviously it's been better than the CFS. I think this shows it, um, but also not great. And importantly, a lot of times we talk about pattern changes and how well the models resolve pattern changes, and I think I think about the current situation. Should we be confident? The ECM showing warmth continuing for forever? Should we have confidence in that? And the takeaway I get from at least this data point is the answer is no. So let's look at a couple of the big pattern shifts that occurred this summer. So we had one here in that verified in late July. These were forecast initialized in the early part of July, and what happened here is that we ended up seeing a shift to a much cooler pattern, and the EC during this time did not catch it. Right, the EC was saying go warm, 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 continue warm, 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 and what actually verified for at least a period of time was a distinct cooler shift. So point against the EC there. And then the other big one that probably stands out here is this period of getting into August here. So you can see that the observed conditions or CDDs shifted from very warm to much cooler. I mean, it wasn't cold, but much cooler. And again, here you see the ECMWF really didn't pick up on it contemporaneously. The ECMWF was kind of, if anything, going warmer, and we actually did, again, for at least a time, pick up a warmer change, and then or a cooler change, and then finally, just at the very end of this period, right, the very end of August, we obviously saw things change back hotter again, which has led into this September, this record warm September, and the ECMWF again, this time, kind of picking up what appeared to be a cool signal, or trying to pick up on a cool signal, which was incorrect. Obviously, the pattern shifted much warmer, and it's been warm since. So if you're looking at the ECMWF as a data point for trying to pick up on a pattern change, at least this summer, it has not been reliable. And I think that's a really important point when we talk about the current forecast. It's tempting again to just think that the forecast is just going to stay warm forever because it is warm, and some of the guidance shows it, but we have to be careful about putting too much weight on the model data, as at least this summer, for most cases, they have not resolved well these big pattern shifts. One other thing I want to mention before I close this out, I did want to talk about this great MGO guidance. It's available. It's empirical guidance. It's available. I'm not going to pronounce her last name, but Kristen here, you can see the link up here, put together this great sort of calendar of MGO. What I like about this is it's a lot of the MGO composites that you see online are available at monthly timescales, and we know that things can change intramonthly. And so this MGO composite calendar is based on 10-day periods. So very useful, especially during periods where there's transitions, and a lot of times we see significant transitions, coming out of the summer to winter, but also sometimes even from early to late winter. So I definitely recommend taking a look at this in more detail. But I just wanted to make one point. So, the MGO we know is in kind of phase one right now. Um, and, but of course, we're making a forecast for 16 to 20-day period. And one thing you see here, I'm going to go out toward, mid-October, early mid-October, which is our forecast window. And you do see quite a bit of uh, change between composites in phase two and three. If you have high confidence that phase two is the verification, well, big ridge in the east, and maybe you can use that to justify kind of the pattern we're in. But if it does sneak into phase three, that's a whole different pattern, right? That's a whole different pattern. So the bottom line is, I think you have to be careful when trying to utilize the MGO to sort of uh, to modify your forecast. There's a lot of different variables to consider. A is are the models even resolving it or forecasting the progression well into the 16 to 20, and then the sensitivities to actually where it verifies. Because again, sometimes historically the difference between one phase can mean a lot in terms of the pattern and result in CDDs. So that's all I have for today. Thank you, and I look forward to talking again more next week.